So Tony, you're celebrating the 4th of July in Texas today? Is that like a time zone thing, or?
Any excuse when the sun comes out, we start barbecuing and start jumping in the pool. No, we just had to move 4th of July for the whole family to get together. So we moved it today.
Thank goodness, I thought there was maybe a Texas Republic new international dateline.
Right, something weird.
That sounds great. I'll go with that. That sounds perfect.
Texas has their own power grid. There's 3 power grids in the U.S., and Texas is on their own.
Is that right?
So if they seceded, they'd be fine as far as power.
And,
Not only that, but they set it up for clap on, clap off.
Well, I believe that, yeah. Let me see what's going on
late
here.
4th, everybody.
Same to you. I'm wearing my USA shirt, but you probably can't see it, so I'm sorry about that.
Now, what the heck's going on here? Why isn't it showing up? Huh.
Are we live, Richard, or are we not?
Wait a minute. Yeah, we're live.
Okay.
We're live, but it's weird. Sometimes the live thing doesn't work in one place. I got it on Facebook and YouTube and Periscope. Let me see if it's on. Yeah, we're on Periscope. Absolutely. So I was bored. I said, "Hey, I'm going to test my microphone out. Let's see who else is bored on Saturday."
Did you switch microphones, or are you working on the same Neumann?
The same Neumann, but what I meant was, I say test. It's really the hardware software that I'm connected to, which is an Arrow, Thunderbolt 3 Arrow, the Unit Audio, U Audio setup, and I bought new plugins. See, I buy new plugins all the time. They are on sale, so.
Was it the ones you were advertising on Facebook? I forget what the names were.
No, but I'm going to have them on the show. They're going to come on probably this week. They look really interesting because they're doing a simple one knob version of noise reduction and clipping, declipping, de-reverb, and all that stuff. So it's just a simple. I have to try them. It's a new noise reduction plug-in company. And it works in Logic, Final Cut, and Premiere, and all those things.
I've got a shoot coming up where the audio guy is going to use the new Cedar system, which is ridiculously high end.
Yes, that is ridiculously high end. That's for mastering and stuff. That I think they use that for a lot, right?
They do. It's for forensic audio recovery,
forensic audio.
Like that.
That's what
But
it
the
is.
other piece that it does, we're in a set of offices that are very sharp and very new, and there's tons of glass. So they've got every space is open space with a wall of glass windows, either enclosing one of the 4 surfaces, or it looks out at a hallway that has huge amounts of glass. So you can imagine the audio nature of all those hard reflections.
Right, exactly.
And so I'm interested in listening to what it sounds like if there are a whole bunch of micro reflections and just that kind of hard quality you get recording in a glass cube.
Yeah, that's like the worst.
Yeah.
That's what clients usually pick.
Well, of course.
Look at how pretty it is.
In a glass cube or next to a freeway, or both.
Or
both. Well,
airport.
Yeah.
We had we had presentations, naturalization ceremonies down at the National Archives in the Rotunda. Giant, hard surface, domed roof all the way at the top. Everything, and everything just fed back, and you couldn't get volume up. It would start feeding back, and everything's echoing. And very, very strange. And we have presidents in there. We did Obama.
I had a tour of the Capitol Dome once when I was a kid. I was probably in 7th grade or something like that. And they were talking about one of the old senators back in the days of Calhoun and those guys figured out that there was a reflection point where if he put his desk exactly at a specific spot, he could hear the opposition talking because of the parabolic reflector over them. So he would never move. He would never improve his place, because I guess there's a seniority thing about where your desk can be. And it was a famous story.
Yeah, exactly. The people don't realize, well, first, hard surfaces are horrible.
Yeah.
For reflection. But when I was in the band, we used to play at Johns Hopkins University all the time in Baltimore, and they had a glass pavilion. And it literally glass surfaces all the way around the thing. but it was very popular. It was a very popular hangout for those JHU attendees. Yeah, so I got a bunch of UA plugins, a lot of the legacy compressors and stuff. And I mean, I got about 6 or 8 of them, so I'm trying them, different ones out. And tube tube preamps and some passive EQ, Pultec passive EQs and stuff. So yeah, I like the Neumann, the TLM 103. It's the one Howard Stern uses, the one you always see him with this. And I've noticed his technique. He doesn't have a windscreen. He holds it to the side of his mouth a lot of times, like this. So if any pops will go straight. Exactly, will go straight through. It won't get into the diaphragm. So.
Speaking of that, I got a weird story. I now own a voice booth.
Oh, you do?
I do, and
Is it one you put over your head? Like
His wife makes him.
Silence?
His wife, the wife makes him sleep in it.
Silence.
She makes him sleep in it because he snores.
I don't know if you've ever gone out looking for voice booths, but they're always $3,800.
Right, they're very expensive.
No matter who you buy them from, no matter where you get them, no matter what brand you got, it's like $38.95. And I thought, I do a good little bit of voiceover, but I don't do that much. Plus, we're not in a permanent place. We were there for 30 years, and I had a bespoke built voice booth in my construction.
Right.
But since we've been out of there, I've been doing just catch as catch can. One came up on Craigslist because I kind of troll Craigslist occasionally. I went, wow, somebody's actually selling a voice booth. So it was fun. I bought it and I constructed it. So it's out in the garage, and it's like so much fun to be back in a booth again when I have to do voiceovers.
Like
so is it really dead?
Yeah. Oops, I missed you, Tony, because too many voices.
It's like an opposite of a hard surface area.
Yeah, the whole thing. It's a standard 4x4 by 7 or 8 foot tall, solid voice booth, and was a pain in the butt to move. It was a minor pain in the butt to assemble, but you go in there and close the hermetically sealed door, and it is such a joy not to have to worry about anything. Because it's always been, is there a lawn crew next door? Is there a plane flying over? There's always something. Well, that was just nice to seal in.
Yeah, I was in one at the Carroll cable television station up in Westminster, and I was amazed at how much sound that it's like a vacuum for sound. This thing was incredible. Right. You walk in and it's like, wow, what a difference walking through that door.
Yeah. Didn't they have a bunch of those set up at NAB as well? I'm sure they did.
I'm sure they did,
Whisper Room and a couple of the other big manufacturers always set up demo models there, so you can go into a legit voice booth. It's, these are just designed for when you have to go in and, like, you're on a network news circumstance and you've got breaking news and you have to go cut promos for that now because the fire is happening now. So you can't mess with, is there air conditioning noise? Is something rattling? Whatever. You just prepare a space that's not total. It's not an anechoic chamber, so it's not like totally silent, but it suppresses everything by probably 70 or 80 dB, and so it's ignorable. So it's fun to have one again.
Oh, I imagine.
I may do my next insert from there. I'll think about putting a camera out there.
Can you bring that to the Creative Summit so we can all try it out?
Yeah, there you go. Yes, I will be starting a week ahead on a flatbed truck, and we will assemble it in the lobby of the hotel.
So they haven't announced that the Juniper is going to be the hotel yet, have they? They said probably, but not specifically.
I just saw you announce the dates.
Right.
And that was about it. I don't know. Have they even updated? They haven't updated speakers or any information really.
No, it's all from 2018.
Because I was getting people asking me, "Wait, are you speaking again this year?" I'm like, "Yeah, on the same exact topic."
Yeah, exactly.
No. And everybody else is coming back. It's the same thing. We liked it so much the first time. Why change anything? So yeah, I guess I haven't heard anything else. It's just the dates.
They're looking at the Juniper.
Not for Bill maybe, but they're good dates for us.
Yeah, the 8th to the 10th. They are trying.
They're good dates. There's always somebody who's going to get hosed, and there's always somebody who's going to think this is perfect, just the way it is.
I don't have an opinion either one way or the other. I'm available all those dates from Halloween all the way up to the first week of Thanksgiving.
There you go.
As long as somebody pays for your hotel and flight, you'll be there, right?
Of course. I am always sponsored when I'm there, going there.
So do we think that there's going to be a new update to Final Cut 10?
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind. It might come out before then because it's 2 years. 10.4 was 2 years ago. That's a long time between major number updates. Last year was 10.4, 10.4.4 or something. And 2 years ago was 10.4 at the Creative Summit. So absolutely, it's got to be 10.5.
Now, the question is it going to be a lot of features, or is it going to be primarily a huge code base rewrite to take advantage of all the new power that the new Mac Pros are going to have?
I believe this will be the biggest rewrite we've seen of Final Cut Pro 10 under the hood.
I agree.
Just saying. And a lot to, we've got things like the Afterburner card.
Right.
And there's a lot of new technology that that Final Cut has to take advantage for. And it even came out in 2011, so they started writing it in 2009 or 10. So the code, I know they've done some updates since, but I think we're and also it's supposed to be what before it was OpenCL compatible or OpenGL. So now they're actually doing the Metal rewrite. So that's huge.
Right.
That's rewriting all your. I mean, that's got to be rewriting all the graphics and all the everything in there. So
right. Plus some of the basic code. I wonder how much Swift touches it now, because there's a lot of subroutines.
I think
that
a lot.
Swift is really fast for.
Also, what's that iPad extension thing called that they are Sidecar. So supposedly Final Cut's going to be able to take advantage of Sidecar and is actually going to have some integration with the iPad, being able to actually manipulate things on there. So that's going to be huge.
Touch.
Yeah, that's actual touch.
Yes.
I want to use a magnetic timeline on Sidecar with an Apple Pencil. That's what I'm looking forward to. I've been wanting that for the last 10 years. So
Luma Touch on steroids.
Pretty much.
Awesome.
Well, I asked the Luma Touch folks when's Apple going to buy them out, and they weren't too thrilled about that. They were saying we'd have to consider it because we really like what we're doing. It's different than Apple. So
maybe they buy it and buy the team. I mean, Apple has been known to do that occasionally.
Right.
In fact, generally speaking, they often say in their press releases, or at least in their casual conversation, that we're not really buying the stuff. We're buying the brains of the people who created the stuff, which I think is smart.
Way more valuable. There's so many people put a lot of stock in the thing they created or the idea, and it's like, no, your value isn't the thing you created. Your value is the ability to generate things and produce things. So yeah, I think that's very smart. I was gonna say on the LumaTouch people, they probably still have PTSD from having been moved around from Pinnacle to Avid back to Pinnacle, and now they're doing their own thing and they're finally free. So the idea of somebody else coming in and saying, "Oh, we're gonna acquire you," probably isn't the most exciting idea for them.
Yeah, and plus they at NAB they let me know that they were coming out with a Mac version in the fall.
A desktop?
Yes.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's a big deal because I mean the iPad version is just fantastic. It makes it enjoyable to edit on an iPad.
Well, now that Apple is unifying their Swift programming so you can preview between iPhones, iPads, and desktop back and forth. They're unifying that Swift development. And anybody else know more about that than me? Then they showed it off at WWDC that you would be able to program and live preview on different devices.
Okay.
And so now that they're doing that, if LumaTouch is written with Swift, I imagine that it would be easier in the coming up in the fall to move over to desktop than it was before. So that's been affecting all sorts of iOS developers and being able to move over to the other operating system. Which would be fantastic. It'd be really cool to see what happens there.
Absolutely. Yeah, the Swift language seems to be a big step up from the current, whether they use C++ or something, I don't even know.
Well, you'd think that just as time goes on, these languages evolve and improve and are more focused at the pathways and the frameworks that modern computing is built on, rather than having been written for frameworks that older operating systems understood but maybe we're not quite as efficient as the new ones.
Sure.
That's the thought anyway.
So I think we better explain what Tony's doing exactly.
He is fixing sprinklers.
He's barbecuing. Is a Korean. He's got an IA glove on. One of those.
See here. Let's see what we have here.
Packets O barbecue.
We are barbecuing ribs and Korean ribs, pork ribs, and I can't flip the camera for some reason.
You can't put the camera down on the ribs?
There they are. There they are. Man, I'm jealous. And also they're Texas barbecue.
Texas barbecue and Texas Korean barbecue.
Texas Korean barbecue.
Just like you've heated up coals. Is that what it is? It's not like a propane grill there. It looks like it's coals and.
Yeah, it's I got a little fire pit here, and so I put a whole bed of coals, and then just laid the ribs on top, and then about every hour I flip them. And they'll last. We'll do this for about 5 hours.
You're gonna be out. Do you just babysit them for 5 hours?
Yeah, like I've been cutting the grass and doing other stuff around the house.
Oh, okay.
Flip them.
Oh, okay.
So they'll be just in time for dinner.
Well, I made the joke before we were on air, so I'll say it again. But really, you're on the wrong podcast because this is not Final Cut Grill.
This
is Final Cut Pro Radio.
I know.
But maybe you, Chris, and I will have to get on. And I don't know if Richard's got a barbecue in the backyard.
Oh,
We'll
absolutely.
have to all get on and do the Final Cut Grill sometime on one of these Saturdays. We'll poke at Chris and bug him. Richard already did an episode with Chris in the car, so I think it's time we flip it. And...
So
Chris in the car grilling.
Yeah, so Chris, I didn't know he was in the car when he agreed to do it. I said, let's jump on. You know, I just asked him if he had an opinion on the Mac Pro, and that's how it started. Of course,
I
knew
have
he
a road
would.
trip portable grill. I'll go down to the ocean. Do one
okay,
Bayside.
Nice. Speaking of ocean. Jaws is $5 on iTunes right now. Just if you were wondering about good deals. And I watched it the other night. I've been wanting to watch Jaws for like weeks, and then I finally saw that it was on sale, and I was like, "That's it, I'm getting it."
And for those of you who don't live near the ocean and want to continue to go in your local lakes and not burn yourself off from ocean swimming forever, then Jaws is on.
How many versions of Jaws was there? The first was really
sequels?
Good.
There's Jaws 2, 3, and there's one called Jaws Revenge.
Okay.
I think there's 4 total.
But the first one was the best?
The first one's the only Spielberg one.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay. That makes
Steven
a big difference.
Spielberg's breakout movie.
There's a place between here and Austin, and it's like they sell boats and they sell jet skis, but they actually have their own little man-made. It's not a lake, it's not a pond. It's kind of in between. It's pretty big, and
a lagoon.
There you go. And you can go out there, and they've got slides and whatnot that you can just rent and have fun. But every once in a while, at night, they'll project Jaws on there, and everybody gets on your little floats and your little tubes, you know, and you tube out, and then you watch Jaws on the water.
That's great.
So they need to attach a fin to a little UAV underwater vehicle, right in the middle of the movie, just driving around.
There's a lot of blood in that movie. I watched it again. And, you know, originally it was rated R, but it somehow got re-rated to PG. But I was watching with all the blood, and I was like, yeah, maybe. I mean, that guy's. It's a little more violent than watching a lawyer get eaten by a T-Rex somehow.
Sure, absolutely.
A lot of good camera moves in there, camera framing too.
Yeah, very good camera movement. Bill
Tony,
Butler.
what kind of trees are those above you? I can't identify them.
What kind of? We've got some mostly oak.
Okay.
And there's some. We have some. I think it's Texas elm or West Texas elm back here as well, but it's mostly oak.
Do they drop leaves in the fall?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I do. I get that too, but I wasn't sure if the weather changed that much. I wasn't sure.
No, I mean, it's usually summer followed by a lighter summer into summer, winter, and then back to hot summer again. But yeah, they fall all the time, constantly. Or, you know, in the fall and the spring. We get the pollen that falls down from them. And
yeah.
And then the leaves, so it's always
I get that like late spring. That I got to keep the car in the garage because it just gets covered with yellow gold.
Everything is yellow. Everything is horrible. It's nasty.
So what did you guys do for the 4th? I know what Tony's doing.
Did I already say it rained on my parade? Was that on? Were we live when I said that?
No. Tell us again.
Okay. So yeah, every year we go down to a parade, and I usually complain about how hot it is. Usually upper 90s, and late in the afternoon, and I get a headache, and it's loud and annoying. But this year, clouds rolled in, and we got 18-mile-an-hour winds and a bunch of rain, and the temperature dropped to 68 degrees, and I can't complain about it being hot this year. It literally rained on our parade. That's the first time in my life I think I can say that.
Legitimately, exactly. So who's Tony? You plan on coming to the summit this year, or?
You know, I really need to. I've never been to the summit before.
So I've just met you at NAB then.
I have a feeling that this will be a big year, hopefully for Final Cut.
Well, you know, listen, I don't care what anybody says. It's got to be 10. It's got to be 10.5. It's been, like I said, it's 2 years. Typical cycle with Final Cut Pro, whole number updates is 18 months. So, you know, now it might come out.
Clearly, you can see why they are a little bit behind schedule, if that is a schedule at all. I think they famously said we ship it when it's ready.
No, absolutely.
But clearly they were optimizing for the new hardware, and when they released the new hardware at WWDC, you can tell that they've already been working in the background on optimizing their pro apps for their new hardware.
Absolutely.
And what we saw from the stage with the incredible track ability of Logic and some of the things we're seeing in terms of the pro apps on the video side, clearly it was we're going to converge so that when the machine comes out, our software is ready.
Yeah, but exactly. But Final Cut Pro has to run on regular equipment as well.
Yeah.
With new features. I mean, people are saying they're just going to be an optimized. They've never done a full number update that was just optimized. It's got to have lots of features or some good big features. Probably, who knows what they're going to do, but I'm sure it's going to have big features as well as optimization. And of course, on the new Mac Pro, it's going to be through the roof.
Yeah. I don't know if everybody remembers, but probably starting about 5 or 6 months ago, too, they did some hiring in the pro app space. And I know they were looking for people who had high experience, and this is Apple level kind of experience in video engineering and video editing and the rest of that. I saw a couple of ads come through. The people on the boards that we all kind of hang out on were saying, "Oh, did you see this? They're hiring." And
we saw some people being hired also for video apps, but dealing with the cloud and with machine learning. And I don't know how long until those. I mean, I'm assuming that'll be years before we see the fruits of those new hires. But yeah, I've noticed some activity there.
Well, it's really interesting because I've been doing a lot of photography stuff just around. For some reason, my clients have wanted me to shoot a lot of photos lately. And so I've been using Luminar a lot and just looking at what Luminar has folded into the program in terms of the AI space. And I'm still kind of getting my head around it, but it's pretty impressive. I mean, it kind of wraps a bunch of things that you would normally do to a photo, assesses it, and gives you a starting place about whether or not you're happy with it. So you basically apply this AI filter, and it'll look at brightness levels, contrast levels, saturation levels, and it does it kind of intelligently. One of the things that it does actually is pick out faces, because it is typical that you might want to increase, say, saturation on the rest of a scene, but that'll make the person in the scene look a bit too ruddy. And I think what it does is it identifies the faces and dials back the application of that AI filter to the people resulting in a pretty much more natural scene. It's really nice to be able to just click a button and go, whoa, that's a lot better. And then you can start tuning up from there and adding features. But I do say to myself, why the hell are we still in the era where you had to notice that the light was set for 5600 Kelvin and you hit the guy with a 3200? We all know that. I mean, it's those are fixed points of understanding in the video field. Why can't the machine just understand that? Oh, look, it's exposed wrong. He didn't switch the camera switch from daylight to tungsten, and yet he shot outside, or he shot inside with a daylight setting. It's too blue. That, we know how to fix it. Why shouldn't AI?
Of course they should.
When you're talking about, sorry, you gonna go?
I got a jet real quick, but
okay.
I am excited about AI, especially visually. I think if they could figure out a way to harness AI with range-based keywords or range-based process, I think that'd be powerful. Like if you could say, this is character so-and-so, and this is character so-and-so, now range-based keyword based on, AI just going through and tagging for you. I think that would be really, or stuff like that. I don't think they'll do it now, but hopefully it'll go there.
So Tony, when you come to the summit, can you bring some ribs with you, please?
Yeah, we should start a new tradition, a new barbecue tradition there.
Exactly.
The heck with that, Tony. I just want you to know that FedEx does accept styrofoam containers, and it is possible for you to take those ribs, put a few of them in tinfoil, put them in a styrofoam container, take them to FedEx, and we could have them.
Yeah.
You know what?
Instead of
I'll try it. I can't guarantee that the ribs will be still have meat on the bone by the time I get them. I'll definitely try it.
But you will send the ribs themselves.
Instead of Armadillo Willie's, see, you're taking over Armadillo Willie's spot.
Excellent.
I know ProRes Beard will be happy.
Yeah.
Okay, Tony. Right. Thanks for joining us.
All right.
Good to see you.
Have a good Saturday.
All right. Talk to you later.
So, what I was gonna say, Bill. Do you remember the days when you would take your photos to 1 hour photo, and then if they were like blurry or under or overexposed, they would slap a sticker on it? Anybody familiar with this? Yeah, I just think we should
listen, I remember. So I probably the oldest one here by a small chunk at least. I remember my first 35 millimeter film shoots having to take the unexposed film, and you would FedEx it over to. In my case, we used PhotoChem in LA, and then it would take them like 48 hours. And then you would go over and wait for a 3/4 inch tape to be done. It was called a rank transfer. And then it was the funniest thing because you wouldn't even have seen anything. You would have no idea what your shots came out like until you got that rank transfer. You would fly home with the 3/4 inch and put it in a 3/4 inch machine and see what you got. Did you expose properly? What about the depth of field? Before that, everything was theoretical. You could see based on looking through the camera viewfinder, and in some cases you could hire an expensive video assisting that would put a small video camera chip inside the lens of the film camera to give you kind of a really rough estimate, but it was really rough, and you never knew what you really had until you came back home. So this is just a vastly different world that we live in now.
Well, I still read interviews from certain directors in Hollywood that think that that's exciting to not know what you have until, days after. And I'm like, yeah, because I guess you have a bunch of money to reshoot if you messed up.
No.
But for the rest of us, it's not that exciting.
What it meant was that a director of photography, a true DP, not, and everybody throws that term around, right, on your student film.
Right.
Somebody who owns the camera becomes the DOP. In the original days, somebody really did have to have a ton of understanding of not only the camera work, but photochemistry and exposure and how that's going to map and what you can ask for in terms of pushing. And so that was a knowledge-based, not a look and assess-based endeavor in the older days. Today, thankfully, and this is better because you waste less time. If something's wrong and the exposure's too hot, even from the 80s and 90s, you could put a scope on it and say, whoa, you got to dial that back somehow. But in these days, your phone will tell you, are you capturing colors correctly? Is your exposure generally okay? So it just takes a lot of the anxiety out. So you get a lot more shooting, and there's, I understand the aesthetic of shoot it when it's right. Don't just shoot 1,000 things and hope one of them are right. And we have people who do that, who leave the camera running and will leave it on, for setups and tests and everything else. And you come back with 90 minutes of footage that you have to cut down to get your 30-second spot out of.
Well, that's why those people should be editors first. I think that
Right.
every director and camera person should have some experience in the edit room, even if they don't stay there, so that they can appreciate the time that they, when they're not getting things or they are getting too much, they can assess that.
Yeah, but basically this is just everything's changed. And so you've got young people coming up into the new system as it is now. So they're not going to have to waste their time trying to figure out things that aren't relevant to getting the image up on the screen the way you want it. So God bless the technology. God bless making it easier. I hope that the next generation of young people coming along get quickly from that just grab everything and fix it in post. There's nothing wrong with that, but it wastes a lot of human energy and time, as opposed to, no, just leave the camera off. Let me rehearse and let's get this right. And yeah, we may miss that moment where he looks at the camera and it's exactly the look I want. But generally speaking, you don't miss too much of that. And if you can direct well, you should be able to direct the equivalent of that look later on. But I don't know. And somebody once said to me, one of the strongest things I heard is that there are people who direct equipment and there are people who direct people. And of those two, I'll take the people who direct people 10 out of 10 times.
Sure.
Because everybody feels they can direct the equipment. And the more the equipment churns, the harder it is. And the more you get pulled into, well, what about this? What about this camera versus that camera? Or those two cameras versus a smaller one? And you get lost in directing the equipment for your shoot. And you get out there and you find you have not built the skills to direct the people that you are shooting. And that's really where the magic happens.
Sure, of course. Same way with recording artists. So when I called you a couple weeks ago and I said, Bill, where is the Bay Area in California? Because that was the only description for the summit at one point. And it seems like it is indeed the Cupertino area, which it has to be, because you're visiting Apple campus, unless you're going to bus people from an hour away.
Yeah, so if you go to the Golden Gate Bridge on Google Earth, and you will notice that inlet there creates a large body of interior water. That is San Francisco Bay.
Right,
it is
right.
large. It goes, from the peninsula upon which San Francisco sits. There's over in Oakland. There's the area north of the bridge, and there's areas south of all that down toward the peninsula, down towards San Jose and Cupertino, and those cities are down the peninsula south of the actual Golden Gate Bridge, which is the tip of the south side of the channel into the bay. And so that whole bay is called the Bay Area.
Right.
So it's generally, in talking, anything within really a couple hundred miles sometimes can be generally referred to as the Bay Area.
So I expect people will, once they get the hotel finalized and get that priced and everything taken care of, that's when people will start signing up, and also when the speakers are announced. Although I think you can trust the fact that the speakers are going to be, typically, they're very, very good, high quality people. But Steve, I go for the Apple meetup and to meet all you guys in person, of course, for our, as Philip Hodgetts always says, the Final Cut Pro annual family picnic.
Right.
Which is what it is.
Been there since the beginning, and we met everybody and said they speak a language that I speak that not a ton of people speak. And this is complex stuff. Video editing is complex. Using a sophisticated tool like Final Cut Pro 10 is difficult stuff.
Yep.
So if you're running into challenges, there is nothing more enjoyable than being in a room full of 10 people who know as much or more than you do. And in the case of the Apple engineers, substantially more than you do about the absolute, this is how it works because we built it.
Right.
And so when you ask them a question, it's not theoretical, it's practical. And they will allow you to do that. You can sit down and talk to product designers and often engineers and people responsible for different aspects of the software and get a sense of, why. We all sit on the outside and we think, just solve these problems. This is really simple. Let's give a shout out to Sean out there, Sean Lander. Why can't they do dupe detection? It must be simple. And then all of us theorize for 9 years about why dupe detection isn't there.
Right.
And it's not that the people who are at the summit will tell you for sure
right.
why there isn't dupe detection now. That's not their job. Their job is not to solve all of our queries and questions, but you will occasionally get something like and not about this topic, but about something, well, that we looked at that and it turned out to be a little more complex than we thought. And in fact, if we were going to solve that for this body of Final Cut users, it would have an impact on a lot of other things that need to remain stable. So it's still under advisement. It's not that it's going to never be done, but we have no timetable for that. You get those kind of soft answers that kind of pull you back from why don't you just do that? Shouldn't be more than a weekend of somebody coding this thing in there and getting it done.
Well, I offered Wes Plate before he joined Apple. He was talking about what kind of plugins people want. And I told him I'd give you $100 for a scrolling timeline plugin.
There you go. Yeah.
So hopefully you took that back.
And, my guess would be at some point they're looking at this range of users, and users from high-end Mac Pros and fully configured MacBook Pros all the way down to people who are doing it on, 9-year-old iMacs. And it could be just as something as if you got those statistics and you go, well, look, there's a big pile of people in the middle whose hardware, if we are constantly looking to update the timeline, it may slow everything down and make it jerky. And the jerky versus smooth for these top-end folks to give them what they want may not be a value proposition they wanted to go toward.
Absolutely.
This is entirely speculation, but those are the kinds of things I think when we just sit in our machine and our suite and say, I want it to do this for me on this.
Yeah, like a project library timeline. I mean, a library,
Yeah, exactly. And, it's like they have to look at not just me and what I own here. You really don't want them designing just for the people with a new Mac Pro in Hollywood.
You
want them to design for them.
Oh my God,
that would be just for them.
If if there's features that the Mac Pro only has, there's going to be even more uproar.
Absolutely. Yeah, wasn't that amazing how everybody wanted it to be so pro, and then it came out and was the first thing we heard.
That's too pro. That's too pro. We didn't want that many PCIe slots. Absolutely.
No, we want it to be pro like I want it to be pro.
Right.
Not like somebody doing, 3 symphony orchestras on a barge.
Sure.
That's what they need.
1,000 tracks, 1,000 audio tracks.
All of which work in real time with whatever processing you want to throw on them.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Here's the thing I expect. I mean, the Mac Pro, obviously, it's very, very high-end Pro, but there's it doesn't seem like it wouldn't have a step down in the future, perhaps. Well,
I read an interesting thread by somebody who I respect a lot. I can't remember who it was, but I just remember thinking, they probably got this right. They were talking about the base configuration because a lot of the YouTube analysis people were going, this base configuration, it's very weak and it shouldn't be this weak. And they just said, you don't understand, man. There's shops out there that will buy 20 of these and gut them. They'll take out everything and throw exactly what they want to in them. They're really buying a chassis as much as anything else.
Right.
So keeping the base configuration as weak as possible that still functions, still does the job, because Apple isn't in the build your own, they're in a configure your own space, but they're not really into we'll sell you the shell and let you put stuff into it. But that's the machine that you can kind of do that with, isn't it? You buy the cheapest, lowest machine and then pack it full of exactly what you need.
Well, that's what I intend to do. I'm going to. The only question is the SSD. How if that's going to be something that we can throw in a third-party SSD in there to replace the existing one, because they encrypt the operating system now, don't they, or something? Or they protect it somehow?
Yeah, I think they've had to, because that's a vulnerability. I think that's a security play, 100%. I think that's, we do not want anybody being able to touch the heart and soul of these machines because there's too many people trying to attack them and get in rootkits and stuff like that. So we're walling off the heart and brain of this machine, except for under circumstances where we know the developers adding code to that kernel are legit.
So I presume because of that the SSD drives are going to have to be qualified, I presume. What do you think, Brad?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean,
I was actually thinking about other hardware kind of rumors. One of them being, there's been a lot of articles this week about the Apple abandoning the butterfly keyboards. We all have MacBook Pros from post 2016, right?
yes.
Have you guys had issues with your keyboards? I'm just curious. And I know we're a small, tiny sample.
I like the 2019 keyboard a little bit better than the 2016. There's definitely a little difference there, so I like it. But I never had that much of a problem with my keyboard. So from 2016.
What do you got back there, Bill? Is that a 20?
No, this is late 20. This is mid 2015, and it's still percolating along.
Okay,
And
so
look,
it's the older.
It's still running. It's running Final Cut Pro 10.5. That's amazing.
Yeah, but no, I think it's interesting that older hardware you can update. I've updated every time. Just click yes, update, and it's all worked fine. But no, the thing I want to say though is that I occasionally go on the road and I take my iPad and I take an old Apple chiclet style keyboard. And for the time I'm working in those circumstances, maybe I'm traveling somewhere and I've got my iPad in front of me, and I thought, yeah, I've got to type a lot of text. Let me just pull out this little aluminum keyboard. In the first 5 minutes, it disappears for me too. I think you just get conditioned to expectations, and I'm all for that. I mean, that's the best part of being an editor, is for getting into that zone where all the hardware and all the IO stuff disappears, and you're mentally in your footage doing to your footage what you wish to do to your footage without having to back up and get to the operator level. It's what I expect that good piano players, and I'm not a good piano player, but they don't think about what keys to press.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
And that is the best part of editing for me. I mean, it's, it took a couple of years in Final Cut Pro 10 to get to that. Everything disappears and I can just edit. And I'm there now, and I've been there through all of 10, and I love that zone because that's when you're actually making your content better. Because you're thinking about this cut or this audio level or something, and you're just touching it and doing it. You're not even thinking about it. You're just doing it.
Well, I saw an interview with Paul McCartney this last week talking about different things, and he said, no, the Beatles couldn't read or write music.
Right.
He said he would not enjoy it if he had to put things down in a notation or whatever and plan everything out. It's just, it's up here and it's in his heart.
Yeah, I posted on my timeline an interesting video. I occasionally go to the music channels, and I like to watch musicians talk about how they play. And I spent a little time on Drumeo lately because it's interesting. They talk to really good drummers about what they're thinking. And there was a fabulous one that I came across yesterday about a serious drummer who's played with like B.B. King and Albert King and all these old blues musicians. And he was talking about going into the studios and how the producers in the studio heard a beat and they said, I like that beat, just do that beat. And so for these records, some of which are classics, they have a very simple time beat. And he was saying that when he got back on stage with the musicians, they were yelling at him, go, why are you, don't play like that. You're playing like it. There were no drum machines back there, but he said, just don't play like that. Right. You got to put some of yourself into it. And he was explaining how variation inside a locked pocket tempo is what the musician brings to the table. Yes. It's not being able to just keep time. Although I love this guy when he was on camera because he was saying, don't do this. And he was sat there and he played like 24 bars of locked, and he was yawning and falling asleep. And yet his time was impeccable. Right. It's like he can't, as a serious professional blues musician, he can't play out of time. He just can't. It's not part of his thinking. Oops.
Well, yeah. When I play, I never use a metronome or anything. I just
all right, Bill, enter your password real slowly so we can all see.
Yeah, let me zoom in on that.
Anyway,
Speaking
of hardware vulnerability and security encryption.
There you go. Absolutely.
I love that. But I love what the guy was saying because it's this you got to get beyond the basics. I mean, yes, you've got to lock down the basics, and you've got to know how you got to know how shortcut keys and all these things work. But those are just the fundamentals. And It's only when those things go away that you get into that lovely place where you can just express yourself in your editing.
Sure, absolutely.
That's kind of what we're all there for.
And we are.
And in fact, I think when Brad was talking last year about how he created the movie, it was really interesting to listen and watch his evolution of what he was paying attention to in terms of the basic first construct, and then how he evolved to thinking about higher level orders of creativity as he got deeper into the movie. And you really do. I mean, you jump back and say, let me look at the structure of the whole thing. And let me see if there's a way I can redo that. And are there pockets where I lose energy? And is there something I can put in there to rebuild audience engagement at this point? That's the stuff that really makes you a good editor, not being able to execute 7 different kinds of inserts.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that wasn't interesting. In fact, I'm still mulling over if I just haven't found the time to do it this year yet, but whether or not I want to take, I put little clips of off the tracks on Facebook, and the next stage of that is I want to put longer clips and even having some my own commentary and putting that on YouTube. And I've written out a bunch of stuff for that. It's just a matter of people keep wanting me to edit their movies, and so I just haven't been able to work on my own stuff. They want to pay me money.
I know.
It's really frustrating. It keeps getting in the way, but no, and in fact, actually, the feature film that I'm cutting right now is very much like that. That we're having to reorder some scenes and smooth out some things to just introduce characters. It's a sequel to a movie that was up on Netflix called The Christmas Project, and they're introducing a whole bunch of new characters, and my head's kind of spinning on the best way to explain it. Now, granted, we have a crutch on this because it's based on some guy's memoir, so it's all there's voiceover throughout.
Sure.
Which is always a great way to if nothing else. I try to find a story way and make it visually obvious, but worst case, you just throw a quick voiceover line in there.
Right. If I can't show it, I can tell it.
I can tell it. Yeah, which shows like The Office and Arrested Development, which are hilarious shows, they rely on that a lot, but then they play to that strength as well, and make the show even funnier because of it. So anyway, structures, it's a tricky thing, especially when you're looking at an entire feature film. I think, and I had to do a trailer. It was they wanted a trailer to show some distributors and stuff, and that was weird going from an assembly to a trailer, because normally I cut the whole movie and we're done, and then a month later they're like, hey, can you cut a trailer? And this time it was, hey, we shot for 2 weeks. I finished I finished an assembly edit, a really rough assembly, and then they're like, can we cut a trailer? And I'm like, I'm still trying to figure out the story, but sure. Yeah. So it took me twice as long to cut a trailer than I normally does, because I was still trying to wrap my head around who all these characters are, what the story is, and everything that's going on. It's a fun game though, and you have to have a macro view, you have to have that aerial view, and then you have to be able to go in and just look at individual shots and frames.
Absolutely.
At any point, it's just stretching out, and that's for a feature that's a hard. It can be hard for people. I enjoy it, and I can usually think about how there's that domino effect through the whole thing. But I imagine that when you're doing shorter 3 to 5 minute videos all the time, that's not something that you have to worry about as much.
I so admire trailer editors, because I can't, I always am in a theater and I watch something, and I remember turning to my wife more than a few times over the course of the years going, why do I feel like everything I saw in that trailer is everything worth seeing in the movie?
Right.
Because there is a conflict here, right? The job of the trailer editor is to put butts in the theater seats, yep. Right? To make it so enticing that people want to pay. And the moment they buy a ticket, their job is over.
Yeah.
And so now they're watching the movie. So I would imagine there's always a pressure to make the trailer as good as possible, even if you're revealing the best gags, even if you're revealing, outcomes.
Well,
Put it in
that's
there.
an interesting conversation, because this last week, touting this what I call the teaser trailer, my first iteration, the director saw it and he's like, "Hey, I like the second half is great. The first half is just really rough and doesn't work." And it was an interesting exercise because going again, I only had an assembly, so a lot of what I was trying to do in the first half of this trailer was explain who all these new characters are and what the new situation is, and when I realized that I didn't need it, I needed it from the sense of it needed to make sense in my head, but then I was able to throw away pretty much everything from that first half of the trailer, and then flesh out the second half a little bit more. And then when I got done with that, I realized it still has a beginning, middle, and end. No, you don't know who everybody is in it, but in what trailer do you know who every character is? You just need the basic situation. And what is this movie going to be funny? Is it going to be dramatic? Is it going to be heartwarming? Why do I want to watch it? And that was an interesting exercise. Again, going back to now working on a rough cut, at least that exercise in picking out the key moments that explain who all the characters are is going to help me going back to the rough cut on what moments are key moments of the film that I've been able to identify. So it was useful from that sense, not useful from the sense of making an actual trailer, because it wasn't and then you are telling in 2.5 minutes, you're telling a whole story.
Absolutely.
And it's a fun thing to do.
Now, I've seen trailers that don't have they have information in the trailer that's not in the final movie. That's aggravating too. I've seen that happen once in a while. Right. You tricked me with that piece right there.
I got a really great shot of the dog, but it doesn't make sense in terms of the story. I'll put it in the trailer. Well, everybody will love the dog. I want to see the dog. Well, we cut the dog from the trailer, so from the movie.
Exactly.
Rogue One is famous for that. Because they changed the entire third act, they reshot it, and so there are tons of shots in the movie trailer that never ended up in the movie.
Yeah.
That are just, and it's kind of weird to look. They're cool looking shots, but it didn't serve the story. So.
Yep. So in the chat, William Jones says, "I find cutting trailers so difficult if I'm in the edit, even if I have just finished. Luckily, I have other people to cut his recent films."
I don't understand why people don't understand this. It's like, if you can write a novel, it doesn't mean you can write a great poem. Right. And if you can write a great poem, it doesn't mean you can write a great news story. I mean, it's all writing, but to hone in on a specific craft requires time and attention and patience. And it's a little tough, I think, in this era because, somebody wants to pay you to do something. You kind of go, yeah, I'm happy to do that, even if you haven't done it. And how do you get good at something? How do you even know if you love it if you don't try it? But that doesn't mean you have the expertise to do it at a high level. So it's something I think just society has to get a handle on.
Well, and I agree with that. Like, normally I have a month before anyone asks me to cut a trailer. Normally I have that month away from the movie. I've sort of been able to forget about it. Right. And then I watch the movie fresh and I'm like, oh, these would make great trailer moments. Right. This time was much more difficult because and we were in a weird situation where distributor wanted a trailer to show privately. And we just had an assembly, and an assembly wasn't at the point where if I had handed it off to a normal trailer editor, they could have watched it and they could have known what the movie was about, because it's still a lot of holes, still a lot of construction happening. And so we were just in this weird position. It worked out. It just took me longer than it normally does. And now I have to go back in the edit. But there were some takeaways that I think will help in the editing moving forward. It was an interesting thing that I normally wouldn't have preferred to do, but it forced me to kind of think about things in a different way than I haven't. And I think it will ultimately work out. In the trailer, I'm happy with, but.
Plus, I'm always scared to death that somebody's going to put something in the trailer that's going to ruin the movie, right? This was a really sparkly line and reaction, and then later on you find out the whole last 8 minutes of the movie has been building up to delivering this line and reaction, and the audience has seen it 42 times watching television over the course of the last 6 months. So it's, oh, there's that scene, instead of leaving them in the moment.
I know some people who anticipate, like, say, a Marvel or Star Wars movie or something, and they refuse to watch ads just for that reason, because they're like, I don't want. And it's true, you do. You know, I think my brother-in-law made this statement this week. I feel like I've already seen Toy Story 4 several times now, because of all the marketing and all the clips and all the things that Disney's put out there. I fortunately have avoided a lot of that, and we took our almost 4-year-old, who my wife said did pretty good in Coco, but she halfway through ran out of popcorn and did not want to stay in her seat. So I'm going to wait till she's 5 to go to the next movie.
So I have to apologize to Johnny Ive. I've been making a suggestion for the last.
You got him fired.
I've been making a suggestion for the last year to keep him away from the Mac Pro. Please keep him away.
You have been saying that.
I have been, and now he got thrown out. So I don't know what, I feel bad about that. What do you guys think about that? But Johnny Ive leaving.
I don't think it was thrown out. I think there was this combination of things. 30 years on, that's a long time with a company. Mm-hmm. And I think he's been plowing this particular set of fields. It's not one field, right? He's got different challenges, I'm sure, designing a Mac Pro than designing an iPhone and the rest of that. But his aesthetic has gone into one category. I think it'll probably be really good. I think he'll probably enjoy getting to look at other, as the people come in and say, would you work with us on this? It'll be at the top level of technological change in America. So it would be interesting to see what he does. I mean, will he pop down and redesign a new smart car? Will he do, I don't know. Listen, there are lamp designers and there are chair designers. You wouldn't get the Eames chair if it wasn't for a designer took a look at this thing, made something that no one had ever seen before, and it gets into the lexicon of product design and goes forward forever. And so it's
Johnny
one
Ive
way.
Refrigerator or toaster.
Could be. But, if he comes up with a small solar combination refrigerator and hot food warmer that is beautiful and that runs entirely on solar power and that costs $15.95 on Amazon, he will completely reinvent that category. Now, that
the Johnny Ive cheese grater. Wait, he did that one already.
Yeah, that's right. He did that. Plus Apple is still his first customer, so the main customer. I'm sure they're going to keep him busy, but they do have a team in place. Apparently, they've been working all along. It's not, we give credit to Johnny Ive, like the way we used to give credit to Steve Jobs for being Apple, but of course, that's not the truth.
Or like Randy Ubilos with Final Cut, obviously there's other engineers and designers, and a lot of them are still there. So
exactly.
A CEO once told me that the difficulty of being at the top of the pyramid is that your job description is basically, this is how he phrased it, achieving results through the efforts of others. So you don't do the work yourself, but you're instrumental in defining the work that needs to be done, how it needs to be done, and then empowering everybody down the line from you and focusing them. Because my suspicion has always been that's the hardest part of being a CEO. Is that everybody wants a piece of your attention. Everybody wants a piece to influence you to spend more time doing the things that it's important for them to get done. And you somehow in the middle of all that have to herd the cats, get the company on a particular path, and then execute on that path to the point where you deliver something great. And I think in that respect, that's why Steve Jobs is looked at so, as difficult and as imperfect a human being as he was brilliant at that. Figuring out where it was going and then assembling teams that had the capability to get there, and then using, and this is the hard part, whatever means are necessary to motivate them to get there. And famously, they weren't always nice means. I mean, like the dumping of the product into the fish tank and saying, wherever there's air, get rid of that space. that's you're taking somebody's product and throwing it in there. And I've heard other stories about that from people I know in advertising, about somebody doing a big presentation on a and the CEO taking it outside, putting it in the parking lot, getting their car and driving over the presentation. Basically acts that are so hostile in the regular realm of human behavior that it surprises you. But in some cases that, oh my God, okay, we got to do something better. We got to rethink this. We can't be complacent about it. There's a place for some of that. Right. And so that balance is not easy. And I think a lot of CEOs are not very well liked because they have to have that piece of, screw you, make the decision. Yes, 250,000 people are going to be put out of work, but this is the right decision. I believe in it. So sorry, those families.
Not that he didn't deserve it, but remember the Michael Dell fiasco thing? When Dell said he asked about the shareholders of Apple, and he said he'd give all the money back to the shareholders, and Steve Jobs came on stage and says he had a target on Michael Dell. He wouldn't do that now. I don't think Tim Cook would do that now, but in those days, he had a target on Michael Dell. So we got another comment from William Jones in the chat. He says, on his last documentary, he had a trailer cut while we were still editing. Our distributors kept going on about a line in the trailer that we didn't have in the film. In the end, we put it back in the film because of the trailer.
But see yes, I understand that totally. But maybe in the context of the 3 minutes or 2.5 minutes of the trailer, the arc led to that, and it was a special moment. In a 2-hour arc, maybe it was just something worth being passed over. This kind of stuff can happen. I think that it's just their own beasts. The work you are charged to do with, figure out how to do that work right. And when there are derivative types of work done from it, you have to stop, settle back, I think, and just rethink your approach.
Absolutely.
Well, documentaries, especially like a narrative film, there's only so much you can adjust and change in the structure. But in doing Off the Tracks and some other documentary projects, there were so many different combinations and ways to put things together that it's almost overwhelming. You just kind of have to pick a path, even if you think there might be 2 or 3 that could be better. You've just got to get it done. And so I could definitely see, especially in a trailer, being at a certain stage, cutting a trailer being completely different than the final film would turn out if you're doing it in that order. If you're cutting trailers and ads while you're still making the film, so documentaries change a ton.
So is Charlie Austin still doing trailers? That's what he does.
So. I believe so. I see him. When he's not working on rebuilding his house and settling into. He's married 3 or 4 years ago, so he's doing that, and he's doing a lot of home stuff. But he's, I think, still working at one of the big trailer houses in L.A.
Right, he couldn't talk about it, but he cut those fantastic trailers that we saw at the Apple a few times, right?
Yeah, so he's an excellent trailer editor.
I tried to have him on the podcast, and we kept going back and forth on whether he could talk about those things or not, and he said, "No, we can't talk about them." I said, "Well, then you can't be on the podcast." Well, no, now I can. Now I'm talking about as a third person, but as far as him coming on and talking about it, absolutely.
Yeah, well, those were just basically when they did the Apple presentations, they led off with I don't think it was it last year or the year before? I think it was the year before.
Yeah, I think so.
It wasn't last year because I saw him and I wasn't there last year.
Yeah, they led off with here are the projects that have been done in Final Cut, and it was cut as a trailer, and it was fantastic. But of course, I don't think Apple got the rights to release that ever publicly.
Right, that's what it was.
Which would be nice. It'd be nice to see. Like I'm excited for Dave Tillman just edited or the documentary he edited about the moon landing is airing on National Geographic.
Right.
And it's done like the Princess Diana and the Challenger documentary, where it's the that lost tape sort of format where they only use archival footage. They try to find rare stuff you haven't seen, and they don't have any narrator or modern day commentary, and they build a story out of that. And it's already been getting the reviews I've read are really positive about that program. So there's some cool stuff there. I'm trying to think. There was another Michael Yanovich who we've seen around on the Facebook groups.
Right.
Just cut his indie feature, and we as a community kind of got to help answer his workflow questions. But it's called Dustwalker. It's like a zombie kind of movie that he did, and there's some cool stuff happening still with Final Cut Pro 10. And I'm hoping that we get to see more case studies and stuff coming out. Obviously there's FCP.co, obviously there's Richard's podcast, but I'd love to see Apple put some stuff maybe on the App Store directly, and we can read or even see interviews and stuff with these people.
So here's an interesting question out of left field. So we know some of these people, and we've known them on the boards for years. And we've often, I know I have, and I think Richard has, and I think you have too, Brad, we've seen these people pop up as somebody that we didn't know about, start asking basic questions about how 10 operates. We watch them evolve over a period of time, doing bigger and bigger projects, and then they get to the point where they land some kind of signature project like this and usually succeed pretty well with it. And my question, and I think this interests me, is how long does it take somebody who hasn't touched 10, who makes a commitment to it, how long does it take them to get to a functional level of expertise where they have command of the program and command of telling their stories in the right way? Because
this isn't directly answering that question, but I know Michael Yanovich said that it took him, that he says just to get the basics of Final Cut Pro 10 will take you 2 weeks of heavy commitment of training. And that's the basics. And then as far as the actual, I mean, I don't know, you said 2 years, but there's a difference between the way some of us came up with it than somebody maybe jumping in today, which was when I first jumped into Final Cut Pro 10, when we did, there was a lot of missing features, and there was a lot of stuff that was changing and evolving, between 10.0 to 10.1 and to 10.3 eventually. Now there's so much more you can do with it. So I don't know the complete answer to that question.
I guess what I'm saying is, if you bought somebody a piano and said you're going to give a concert, we know kind of what to expect after a month, and we know what to expect after 6 months, and then, but you wouldn't expect a really decent concert for a couple of years, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's fair. And I'm wondering if these software tools are any different than that. Yes, people will have different amounts of talent. And somebody once described talent to me as that thing that makes you want to go back and keep practicing over and over and improve yourself. That's if you are motivated and interested in continuing to refine your skills, generally constantly, that's kind of one definition of talent. You don't want to get away from it. You want to keep going, and you want to keep going, and you constantly improve. So, and maybe there's a part of it in your brain that has to be able to see where you're not doing well and find a way to work around that so that you can do well in that. But it's just interesting to me because we're seeing these people doing these kind of things. And it seems, as I look back over the people I've known on the boards, that have gone from no knowledge of 10 to doing good things. I mean, really good things with 10. Most of them have taken at least a couple of years, and they've done pretty good things along the way, and constantly better things along the way, and maybe even some successful things along the way. But I would imagine that most of us who have been, let's say, the 5-year club or the 7-year club, we look back and we go, yeah, I knew a lot in year 2, but man, did I improve from 2 to 3. And wow, 3 to 5, I am so much more fluid and so much better. And you get up to 7 and 8, and I'm thinking really now, I know some of us are 7, 8 years into Final Cut Pro 10. The way I think about it, the relaxation I have with it, to just sit down and know I'm going to be able to nail what I want to do. What I want to do may be not exactly the right thing to do. That's me. That's not the tool. But to just be able to sit down completely confident that I can express my ideas through this tool is just now a no-brainer. And that's a real comforting place to be. But I would say,
that means, though, if you're comfortable, then change is about to happen, because
and
technology doesn't let you get that comfortable.
Maybe that's good. And maybe I have to relearn and get rid of the keyboard and do it all touch. I don't know, whatever it's going to be, but it's been interesting. I also would say that my growth in years 7 to 8 or 6 to 7 was pretty dramatic. That all, and that has nothing to do with the basics. It has nothing to do with learning keyboard commands. It has to do with looking into these things that sit there, whether it's color correction or the database or ways to structure and organize libraries for different effects. Those things have been, I've still had those aha moments in those. Here I am 8 years in. So I don't expect that ever to stop. And you're right, they've changed the program. So they've given me new tools along the way.
Yeah.
So if they do come up with a roles-based mixer, there goes my next year. There, oops, Richard, you're not, I'm not hearing you.
I've seen him.
Sorry, I had to.
There you are.
I had the mute on, of course.
All right. Well, I probably need to take a
Oh, look who's there.
Hi, sweetie.
Make sure you get a release from her signed, Brad. So
send me the form. I'll get it.
Okay.
We're your dad's friends. So. He's talking to us on his phone.
She's so cute. She's so cute. What is her name?
This is Isabella.
Isabella is so cute.
No, she can't hear me. It's adorable.
She can wave. Maybe she'll see me waving. Do you need to eat lunch? Did you eat lunch already? All right. Well, I'm gonna go take care of this one.
Okay. Excellent. Okay.
But, great chat. A lot of creative conversation.
We will do a few of these more over the summer when everything's so slow in Final Cut Pro news. Just I was just sitting around and said, "Hey, I'm bored. Let me see who's available," and we just jumped on. That's all there is to it. So
right. There you go.
All right. Well, I'll sign off. We'll see you later.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Thanks, Brad. Hang on there a second, Bill.
Sure.
We're still live.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
Then there were two.
Yeah, exactly. So are you planning on coming to the summit this year or at this point? Or
I am. Like always, I've just been busy here.
Sure.
I thought I was going to do, not really a retire thing, but I thought I was going to cut back and just do projects that I kind of like. But I've had a lot of projects that I've liked. It's really been an interesting year this last year.
It has been. Has been indeed. I think
this was
it's
the first year. I'm doing a lot of audio work in Final Cut Pro 10. I'm, got radio spots on the air around here that I cut in Final Cut Pro 10. With my new voice booth, we've been recording some people and putting them out on there. I shot my first ProRes RAW pieces, and I'm working through the workflow to get them. And I'm making mistakes, but this is good. It's the right time to make mistakes before
absolutely.
You really do it.
Yep.
So that's been interesting. It's just generally Final Cut Pro 10 has really been rocking for me.
Yep. And like you said, if 10.5 comes out, I mean, Apple has announced an update to Final Cut Pro 10 for the fall. So
yeah.
So I presume that's either going to be I presume it's going to be 10.5. I mean, I think we'll see 10.5 by the summit. It just doesn't make sense not to.
I would suspect that is such a big watershed. If, as we presume, they are rewriting a lot of the code to take advantage of this new hardware,
sure, then
I would think they would want to get into the mindset of work before 10.5, if it is 10.5, and work after 10.5. That kind of a watershed. Again, my concern is that people don't think just in terms of features.
No.
Because we have in the past gotten amazing updates that solidified and sped up things, but didn't provide a lot of new controls or a lot of new things. Now, that said, right, the people who scour through WWDC videos have already seen, oh, look, there's a new way to do masking here. Look, I can see some little tiny pixel behind the presenters at WDC, and that means that something else is coming out. So they may already have baked into the software with this underlying engine revision if it's happening. new features, and that would be great. We'll be excited to hear about them.
Absolutely. So one of the best things last year, you weren't there last year, and I was sad that you weren't, because I enjoyed meeting.
Me too.
Me too. We had a one-on-one meeting with Apple. I mean, that, we had some people. I can't talk about what was going on there, but we had the one-on-one meeting because that was public. That part was public, and that was fantastic. That was not at Apple campus. Right. That was at the Juniper. We saw them at Apple campus as well. They did their presentation, and we got to see the hands-on. So this year, I expect we'll see the Mac Pro will be in the demo rooms. And whatever.
My feeling is that Apple is changing a little bit. I mean, I understand that security and not letting potentially competitive information out in public before it's ready for release.
Yeah, absolutely.
We know that other software vendors, we've seen it happen just in the small plugins community, right?
Yep.
Plugin company A releases something, and then 5 days later, plugin company B releases kind of a ripoff of it at half the price, then markets the hell out of theirs like it was theirs, when in point of fact we probably know the guy who actually came up with the idea and coded it first.
Sure.
So Apple is wary of that, and I get that. But there has been a change over the course of these 8 years from Apple being just 100% on lockdown, don't even consider it or whatever.
Oh, absolutely.
To increasingly more. And I think you and I were part of some of those years where people would tell us stuff kind of off. They wouldn't really release stuff, but they would say, if somebody comes out and says Apple is doing this for this reason, I'm going to tell you that specifically is not true, and that you have our blessing to go out and say, you can't say what we are doing. And in fact, in lots of cases, we're not going to tell you we're doing, but we are telling you quietly, because we can't go out. The rules say we can't go out and broadcast this.
Right.
But no, the chattering class is getting this wrong.
Right.
And then we could be one of the voices saying, this is wrong. And I know that this is wrong. This is not what their thinking is. I don't know what their thinking is, but I've been specifically informed that it ain't this.
Well, I'm very proud of the Aussies that came last year, the Final Cut Pro creators. We had a bunch of them, 4, 5, 6.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that they said at the Apple meeting, the one-on-one meeting, was, we'll see how this goes.
Right.
If things don't get leaked out of here, well, there's encouragement to do it again. So I'm proud of the Aussies. They didn't leak anything.
And not only the Aussies, but everybody. I mean, we heard that. Remember that year that they did the reveal and they showed us things and they put us all under NDA?
I wasn't there. I wasn't there for that one. You were there, but I was not there for that one.
Right. So they put us all in a room. They put everybody under NDA. So this was, I think, Apple's baby steps into, can we send information out there, ask people not to talk about it, and will there be compliance, or will everybody run to the, like the old days of run to the payphone and all the reporters are out there just trying to get it onto the web. Will this tendency, which is true in the modern era of, I know something special, so it'll be really cool if I go tell everybody first.
Yep.
That's a chunk of the world we live in. But I think they got more and more comfortable, and so I think they're able to do more now. Within the construct of, it is their intellectual property. And letting that get revealed. I mean, we all saw that with that iPhone left in the bar 6 years ago, right?
Yeah, was that on purpose? I mean, that seemed like it happened every year after that. There's like a soft reveal of some sort.
I don't know, maybe. That's too inside baseball, I think, to figure out whether those things are real or fake. And, this is the era of, it's almost impossible to tell what news is real news and what news is faked up news.
Absolutely. So, so William Jones says, what did they show in that secret meeting? Well, we're not going to tell you what they showed. It was more of a talk back and forth. Question.
We can put it back this way. They showed us features that no one had seen before that eventually worked out and that everybody saw and that is now a part of Final Cut Pro 10. But it was a slice. I would say if this is the whole of what's going into 10, we were allowed to see this interesting little piece in advance. It was a very specific thing. And it's like, I think they were saying, okay, if we reveal it to a room full of people and ask them, put them under NDA and ask them not to talk about it, will they talk about it? It's almost like a sociology experiment. And nobody talked about it.
Exactly.
And it was great.
Yep.
Everybody was really respectful of being allowed to see that. And when the software shipped with that capability, the whole, I guess it was a sigh of relief. And that's why we get more little reveals, and why, they can feel like they're not going to give away the crown jewels, but they can tell you, no, everybody's saying all the crown jewels are rubies. That's not true.
Right. Well, the one thing I can say, which is when they announced that Apple, they came in there and they were talking and they said, I forget who it was, it says, these are the rules. No audio recordings, no video recordings, no photographs. If those rules are not okay with you, there's a Starbucks across the street.
Right.
That's exactly that's what it was. So you had to agree to it. So that was fine.
Yeah, and even on a larger level, I think that is maybe one of the key things that we all have to understand, that right now, with the web full of information from all sorts of sources, all sorts of people who have different levels of expertise, the coin of the realm is kind of trust now.
Yes.
For clients, for crews, for everybody out there, if you are known as somebody trustworthy, who somebody can tell you something in confidence and you're not going to blab it all over the place, it really does increase your stock in terms of somebody people will talk to and relate to. Because there are just so many people out there. And this is difficult too, because, we see people out there who get their iPhone and learn 10 things, and then they put themselves up and here's my YouTube video as an expert in these 10 things. And they may be an expert, but they may not be an expert. They may just be a good presenter, or they may just have, they just may get a series of ideas that they pick up this place on the net, and they turn around and present as if they're an expert in there. And so their expertise is a bit wide, but an inch deep.
Yeah, I've been privy to conversations before, just, 2 or 3 people talking, maybe somebody, and they say, no, I don't want to hear this on Final Cut Pro Radio. I said, don't worry about it. It's not what I do. I understand.
Well, right, but that's why people keep coming back to you, Richard, because you pay attention to that stuff, and
sure,
you have become an honest broker about.
Absolutely.
When you're talking about rumors and things that are maybe they have some basis in reality, they aren't just stuff you've made up out of whole cloth.
Right.
And I just find that the curation of people and ideas, and it's not saying you can't get things wrong, because I've got things wrong.
Of course.
I remember in year 2 and 3. I remember specifically one time I was talking to Phil and Greg at Intelligent Assistance, and they were saying, we were watching what you were doing online, and he's like, he's got this right, he's got this right, he's got this right. He's like, no, he totally screwed that up. And as developers, they understood exactly where my expertise ended, and I was making it up. And so I tried to start saying, I'm making this up. These are fantasies and thoughts of mine. They are not factual.
Absolutely.
But the factual stuff I will label as factual and tell you can depend on this
Absolutely.
stuff.
And I always say the fact that I'm not involved directly with Apple, I'm not on the beta team, means I can talk about stuff. If I was on the beta team, there would be no Final Cut Pro Radio, because I couldn't talk about anything.
No, you couldn't say anything. And this is interesting. These companies have to have these tiers of information disseminators, and you've got to become trusted enough to get closer to the information. Although there will still be plenty of walls. You're not NDA, and you're not on the team, and you're not working for Apple, so you can't get to know everything.
Right.
It's just it's been an interesting series of learning how this all works.
And we're still learning, and we're going to learn more this year, I hope.
I believe so. I believe this is going to be an exciting year, and God willing, and the schedule doesn't mess up, I will be back there again.
So this is the first year I'll be flying into San Jose instead of SFO, because Southwest has a direct flight there this year. They changed. I check it every year, and they changed, and they have direct flight in and out of SFO. So I guess I'll get an Uber out of there, because the shuttle.
I think I used to have to go from Southwest, where I did most of my travel, because it's based in Arizona, where I used to live.
Okay.
But I think I did fly in on United just because they were the only one services.
Yeah, that's what I used to.
But yeah, it's a much less crazy airport. I mean, SFO is San Francisco International is big,
right,
major. San Jose is much smaller. It's a long, thin terminal. And
it's a lot closer. A lot closer to Cupertino. It's 10 miles versus 30 some miles for SFO. That's the other reason.
Yes. Yeah. And so it's only a 10-minute Uber over there, or cab, or whatever you want to take.
Yep.
Whether you're a Lyft person or whatever. And the fun thing about this is that there's almost always somebody that you look around at the terminal and you go, "Oh, you got here."
There you go. Let's take an Uber together.
2 out of 3 years, I've shared Ubers into the city.
Yep. All right. I think we solved all the problems for this month for Final Cut Pro.
So.
Everything that we solved it all today. And you just rewatch the replay, and you'll have all the answers you need for everything Final Cut Pro related.
Always fun to chat, Richard.
Thanks for dropping in with us, Bill. I really appreciate it. I will talk to you again.
No problem at all. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone.